This video lecture is about the poem Counterattack by Siegfried Sassoon. Before you watch this video, I'd really encourage you to make sure that you've read the entire poem yourself and have gotten some kind of idea of what this poem is about. Most of you will be able to get most of the techniques and how they work within the poem. This video is just to make sure that you're really getting to the analysis and making sure you're thinking about what ideas are coming through within this poem. It's pretty clear to see from the first reading that this poem has a real sense of hopelessness about it. The hopelessness and the futility of war is really what he's trying to present through his text. Let's start with the first stanza. Before I begin with the annotations, I'd just like to say that you can really see within this first stanza how Sassoon gives a responder a very clear image of what it was like to be there in the war. Okay, it's describing the conditions as they were, which were miserable and disgusting. First line, we'd gained our first objective hours before. I've underlined the word we'd. I want you to think about why I've underlined that. How does that draw you in as a responder? I've also underlined the word objective. I'm not going to really explain why in this video. I want you to tell me what kind of atmosphere you think the word objective presents to the responder. While dawn broke like a face with blinking eyes. First of all, what is the technique? We can see there that the technique is a simile. It's comparing dawn to a face. But that's not all. What kind of face is it comparing the dawn with? A pallid, unshaven and thirsty face, blind with smoke. What kind of face is that? Hopeless? Unhealthy? Usually when you think of dawn breaking, it's bringing a new day. Maybe kind of giving a sense of hope, but not in this poem. With the rising of the sun in this poem, it is just another day of pain and suffering as the trench warfare continues. Things seemed all right at first, we held their line, with bombers posted, Lewis guns well placed, and clink of shovels deepening the shallow trench. I mean, there's a bit of onomatopoeia with that clink of shovels. You could probably talk about some extended meaning with the use of that technique. The place was rotten with dead, green, clumsy legs. The imagery there is quite disgusting. It's just telling us that the trenches are full of death and decay. It's also as if the dead soldiers are nameless and faceless. They're insignificant. All they are green, clumsy legs, not humans who have been killed. High-booted, sprawled and grovelled along the saps, and trunks face downward in the sucking mud. I think here the sucking mud the mud is personified. It's as if the mud is sucking these soldiers in. It's kind of symbolic of death. Well, it is symbolic of death. They're being sucked into this mud. Wallowed like trodden sandbags loosely filled. Another technique here of a simile, or the use of a simile. And this is also, he's also dehumanized the soldiers here. But he's also used the word wallowed. I want you to think about that word wallowed. Have you heard it before? Usually, they say that pigs wallow in mud. So the way that they're looking at the soldiers here, really like dehumanizing them, giving us a sense that they're just basically sandbags or they're just pigs in the mud. And naked sodden buttocks, mats of hair, bulged clotted heads slept in the plastering slime. So I haven't underlined or coloured those lines, but just let's read them again. And naked sodden buttocks, mats of hair, bulged clotted heads slept in the plastering slime. Think about that word slept. What is the poet really talking about there? And the imagery there of the heads and the the um, the bodies just completely saturated in the trenches. And then the rain began, the jolly old rain. And do you think that the rain would be jolly to the soldiers there? No. So it's a good use of irony. What else can happen? Well, now it's going to rain as well. We'll move on to the second stanza. A yawning soldier knelt against the bank. Okay, we start off this second stanza a bit more peacefully, like compared to the gross imagery that we've just come from. It's a pretty peaceful start. And you can see from this line, and I've underlined it, they're actually calling them soldiers, or he's actually calling a soldier a soldier. But when the chaos starts, they are nothing but a fighting machine. That's an important point. So when it's peaceful, they're soldiers, but when the fighting begins and there's just terror and frenzy everywhere, they're no longer soldiers. They're just part of this machine that needs to get the job done. Staring across the morning blear with fog. Okay, I want you to think about that one. First of all, what does blear mean? Maybe you can look that up. Okay, I want you to think about what the morning could be doing and why they could be doing that. It's a kind of a metaphor there. He wondered when the Alamans would get busy, and then, of course, they started with 5 nines, traversing sure as fate and never a dud. Mute in the clamour of shells, he watched them burst. Why do you think I've underlined those two words, mute and clamour? I want you to think about that. Are those words similar or are they very different? Okay. They're very contrasting words, okay? And I think if you extend that contrast and think about why it's there, the soldiers are helpless. They are mute against the shells. They cannot speak, they cannot fight, they cannot protect themselves. Spouting dark earth and wire with gusts from hell. What's that metaphor? Why do you think it's there? Think about that yourself. While posturing giants dissolved in drifts of smoke, and I've underlined that as well. I want you to come to class armed and ready to tell me what that line means and how Sassoon has created meaning. He crouched and flinched, dizzy with galloping fear. So there's kind of a bit of an onomatopoeia with that galloping. If you think of a horse galloping and the sound that would make, what could that be similar to in war, or what could it be similar to in this specific scenario? Sick for escape, loathing the strangled horror and butchered frantic gestures of the dead. I mean, that's all death imagery, and those words, butchered and frantic, it's kind of like they're just left there with the mangled corpses. Okay, third stanza. An officer came blundering down the trench. Stand to and man the fire step. On he went, gasping and bawling. Fire step, counter-attack. I think these first couple of lines in this stanza are really ironic, because the officer is expecting the soldiers to be calm and to be defending themselves and to be fighting. But what is he doing? He's frantic with fear. Just look at the words that have been used there. He's blundering, he's gasping, he's bawling. So if he's like that, he's meant to be in charge. How were the soldiers meant to be reacting to this? Then the haze lifted, bombing on the right, down the old sap, machine guns on the left, and stumbling figures looming out in front. Oh Christ, they're coming at us. Bullets spat. Think about what bullets spat, how that creates some kind of meaning there. And he remembered his rifle rapid fire. And it's not even read like that because it's got an ellipsis there. And he remembered his rifle rapid fire. I've coloured those R's I'm hoping that you'll know what that technique is. We've got the last stanza. And started blazing wildly, then a bang. Crumpled and spun him sideways, knocked him out, to grunt and wriggle, none heeded him, he choked, and fought the flapping vows of smothering gloom, lost in a blurred confusion of yells and groans. Down and down and down he sank and drowned. That second last line, the first use of repetition there of the word down, he sank and drowned. I mean, just thinking about it, drowning is a horrific way to die. But dying and being killed in war is also horrific, especially within this scenario that he is describing here. Bleeding to death, the counterattack had failed.